us a wave. It's lovely to see you all. I see clapping hands. Lovely. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. So I do know that having your camera on uses more data. So I'm not requiring that everyone keeps their camera on. You can go ahead and switch them off. And also ask that unless you are asking a question to the speaker, that we keep ourselves muted, because of course this does, it can be quite disrupting when somebody's audio comes on when somebody else is speaking. Great. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is the first online seminar that we've had in a long time, and we are planning to resume this series. So we mentioned already that there's another workshop happening next week, or online seminar. And then next year we'll be having them more frequently. We will share the topics and the dates with you next year. I know everyone is ready for a break, so they're not thinking too much about January, but we will share those with you. And yeah, so I'd just like to introduce the team that we have with us today. From SCAT, we have Abigail and Indy and Bridget, who everybody knows. And then we also have another SCAT colleague, Katlego. So welcome to the Scatties. I don't think I missed anyone. And then from SAFC, we have Tara, and Nyembezi is joining as our facilitator. And I really hope I haven't missed anyone. Yeah. Okay, if I have, give me a shout. Great, so now I would like to introduce our speaker for today. Nyembezi is going to be taking us through the session on the topic of floods. We've also prepared some resources for you that we will share the link to the resources after the seminar, so that you will have some other resources to share with your community based on what you've learned. So yeah, I think I was told that Nyembezi didn't need any further introduction, so I'll hand over to you, Nyembezi. And also I just wanted to say that the session is being recorded, so if your connection is lost, or if for any other reason you lose your connectivity, we will send you the link to the recording afterwards, and that you can also share with your colleagues. Great, thank you very much. Nyembezi, I'm going to be in the background to support you when needed, but I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, Claire. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for attending this seminar. And as you have seen in the invitation, it's about floods. So we can look at municipal flood management in South Africa. With respect to the legislative and policy arrangements that are available, with a view that we can be able to identify areas of advocacy in our localities, to know what rights we have that the government must respect and fulfill, so that as we do our advocacy work around the issue of floods at our local level, we can know, have some things to anchor this on. And of course, we know also flooding is linked to climate change. So some of the things are going to point at a direction that says it's not supposed to be business as usual, because of the likelihood that floods are going to occur with more severity and more frequently. So in this presentation, I'm just going to take it step by step in terms of that line of argument, but I will also be alerting you to some issues that you need to think about in terms of, is it applicable in your locality? What experience do you have of that? And what is it that we need to do to advocate for a better scenario? As to ensure that out of this workshop seminar, we are able to have some questions, some areas to think about as homework, that we can reinforce the work that we are already doing. We have also made an arrangement that if you have any questions, you can write them down and then forward them. And then when we do the discussion, we can be able to field the questions, because some of you may have a bad connection, but we want to get all of those questions and incorporate them as part of the discussion. So what I hope to do is to make this input for about 15 minutes. And then maybe after 11:30, 11:35, we can then begin to have a discussion, and everybody is invited to participate in the discussion. So let us begin. So as I say, the focus or topic is about the municipal flood management in South Africa. And we know that, and I'm also drawing some inspiration from some of the work we did with the colleagues like Angela van der Berg at the University of Northwest in Potchefstroom, and other colleagues. So when we were looking at this topic, I thought maybe that angle could work. So as we know, natural disaster losses and people's exposure to national hazards are increasing all over the world, because this human-induced climate change is likely to result in continuing upward trend in the occurrence of natural disaster. And the recent studies, they indicate that flooding is the most frequently occurring natural disaster. In the urban context, flooding impacts more people than any type of natural disaster. And in South Africa specifically, climate change has resulted in infrequent but heavy rains, flash floods, punctuating the normal arid conditions. You will remember at our Learning Festival, we shared videos about floods in areas in places like Pakistan, in places like Durban, and we had a bit of a discussion in terms of how, for example, what is happening in 2022 has got such a big magnitude. So this is why we are also focusing on this, because, for example, between 2011 and 2018, South Africa experienced severe flash flooding in several of its urban areas. And the occurrence seemed to have increased as a result of, it resulted in damage to infrastructure, to agriculture, property, human health, and well-being. And I'm listing those things because it's also about wanting us to think about the devastation that happens along those lines: infrastructure, agriculture, property, human health, and well-being. Of course, South Africa boasts an extensive legal framework for disaster management, including laws and policies on other matters related to disaster risk reduction. Nevertheless, the extent to which governments, specifically at municipal level, are legally bound to prevent the damage caused by natural disasters remains unclear. And I think it is that element of lack of clarity that brings us together today, because it means we still need to advocate for clarity on those things, for uniformity, and also for something that now takes into account that there's also climate change. So it should not just be a stopgap, it should be something more sustained. Of course, I will make mention in terms of the applicable laws to look at this duty, and maybe some examples of just two case studies in terms of the case law, in terms of how also the courts have dealt with the issue of flood management at municipal level. Two cases, one in Overstrand municipality here in the Western Cape, and also one in Ekurhuleni municipality in Gauteng. Because I think the importance of just touching on these two cases, it will also be about saying at some point we might also need to litigate, to take matters to court as part of advocacy to enforce what government needs to be doing. So as we know, natural disasters, they occur in many forms, and then floods are part of that. In urban context, flooding impacts more people, like I've said, and then the impact of floods can come in two ways. One, in a tangible way, the other way in an intangible way. Tangible impacts include damage that can be quantified in monetary terms, such as I've said, damage to property, infrastructure, loss of profit and income to businesses, and so on. On the other hand, intangible impacts cannot be readily quantified in monetary terms. So it could include loss of life, negative impact on human mental and emotional well-being, the negative impacts on the environment, such as loss of recreational environment and sensitive ecosystems, as well as contamination of drinking water. So it would then mean that in doing our advocacy work, we also, in understanding the impact of floods, need to have those categories in mind in terms of what is tangible loss and what is intangible loss. So we also know that there isn't that much universal definition of what constitutes urban places. But when we look at floods, we can say flooding affects all types of human settlements, including smaller ones, but there will be a difference in that in rural areas, flooding may affect larger areas of land and affect poorer people who are most vulnerable. Of course, it will also apply in peri-urban areas. But in urban areas, it affects more people and it is difficult to manage. And we'll get to see and understand why, because in focusing on that, it will then also mean a municipality that is in a rural area. It's a response and plan for floods may also be shaped by that locality to say we are in a rural area. And then in an urban area, it might also be slightly different because of the urbanization and all that. But we know that flooding generally refers to an overflow of a large amount of water beyond its natural limit, where the overflow normally covers dry land. And then in the context, that's in the context of rural area mostly, but flooding in urban context, it refers to this large amount of water caused by local heavy rainfall, maybe a riverbank overflowing, or high tides or storm surges. So the effects of floods due to local heavy rains are exacerbated by insufficient and poor urban drainage system. So if you look at the risk factor, you will find that in an urban and a built environment, infrastructure plays a lot in terms of how vulnerable you are. For example, if there is good or poor drainage system. Flash flooding, in turn, it strikes without warning and without giving victims time or adequate preparations, and it leads to devastation and impact. So if we have this type of flooding, flash flooding, it also means like, how do we ensure that we are protected against it? Because it strikes without warning, without giving sufficient and adequate time to prepare. And usually its impact is lasting and devastating. So disaster management in general, it pertains to the organization, the planning, the application of measures to prepare for, to respond to, and to recover from disasters. So when we look at the municipal preparedness, we will be looking at those elements to see if there is a plan from the municipality. And then if that plan contains application of measures that will help to prepare, to respond, and to recover from disasters. And of course, it means our input will be about strengthening that document to make sure that it adequately speaks to that need. And of course, as I've said, there seems to be this uncertainty as to what extent is the municipality responsible for dealing with floods. And in some cases, it could be like, no, this is sufficient or this is not sufficient. for example, in the case of Western Cape, Hermanus, but in another case, it would be like in Gauteng, no, the municipality is supposed to do more. So we'll have to look at those elements so that we can hold our municipalities to account. And of course, we know South Africa is prone to floods because of its topography and its risk profile. There are areas that are low-lying. There are areas that are near riverbeds. But what is most important is that historically, where people lived and how they lived because of apartheid, there were some settlements that are in unsuitable places. So in the floodplains, along the riverbeds, and because of that, and that is what we've seen in Durban, because of that, we find that there is still a large number of people who are vulnerable to this day because of those historical settlements, some of which have mushroomed recently, where people will just put up a settlement in an area that is prone to floods. And it means that we need to know that we are sitting in that time bomb in terms of just where the people are located. And of course, we have the Disaster Management Act as one of the important pieces of legislation to deal with floods. And it says a natural hazard such as flood, for example, it qualifies being declared a disaster if the magnitude and severity of the occurrence causes or threatens to cause death, injury, diseases, damage to property or infrastructure and environment, or disruption to life of a community. And if the occurrence is of a magnitude that it exceeds the ability of those affected by the disaster to cope with its effect using their own resources. So now, if we're now to look at that piece of legislation, the Disaster Management Act, and then we look at how is it defined, we then would need to underline in terms of, in our locality, what would we consider to be severe? In our locality, what would we consider as posing threat to or injury and the diseases and all of that, so that we ensure that our local plans, they really are specific and ready to respond. Because in some municipalities, some councillors may assess risk and put risk at a higher level or at a lower level, and thus disadvantage the people. So we need to ensure that the pitching of the risk and all of those elements in that definition are up to date. So the rising occurrence of flooding and the severity of its impact has prompted questions regarding the role of municipalities in disaster management, including the extent to which municipalities are obliged to prevent damage caused by flooding. This situation has highlighted the need for us to look at all of these instruments. So now, if we can look at the legislative framework that speaks to the municipal responsibilities, we'll find that in South Africa specifically, municipalities have the authority to determine the spatial and economic configuration of towns and cities. And they have a responsibility to provide and maintain critical services such as water and sanitation, drainage, transport, electricity, healthcare, and housing. Municipalities are also involved in the management of ecosystems, including freshwater, coastal, forest, grassland ecosystems, all of which underpin the economic activity and human well-being. So with that responsibility for the municipality, it then puts squarely and focus in terms of what they need to do, because flooding affects some of these elements we've spoken about. And I would also like to underline the part about human well-being, because a disaster that affects penguins, seals, or what is different from a disaster that affects human beings. Because, for example, if there's an oil spillage or what, this is not flooding now, just an example, you can round up your penguins, put them in pens and wash the oil off and all that. You don't have to consult and have a meeting with them and ask, do you want this hot water or this cold water? You can do it, but if there's a disaster that involves human beings, their well-being is much more important, such that even the responses must be consultative and participatory. So municipalities are often in the first line of response to disasters, as we said, and they must have local disaster management plan. So the municipal local disaster management responsibilities, they pertain to prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery from and rehabilitation of disasters, including instances of flooding that have led to disaster situations. So in other words, when we look at these local disaster management plans, we will look at all of those elements to see how adequate do they address what they need to be addressing, including the allocation of money to prevention, allocation of money to mitigation. And this will also become more sharpened in the context of climate change, because this is a risk that is continuing and that is intensifying. So in terms of the local disaster management, it's defined as a continuous, multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary process of planning and implementation measures undertaken by local government, municipalities in the sphere of government closest to the people. And it's aimed at, as I say, preventing, reducing, and all of that. So all of those elements need to be present if we are to have a properly put together a tool. And also, South Africa disaster management law and policy framework includes a generic framework type legislation that deals with general matters pertaining to disaster management, not necessarily just floods. And that legislation dealing with specific types of disaster. And then the other laws that regulate the broader specific management and disaster risk to reduce the risk in specific sectors of our community. So I will just gonna list, for example, the Constitution is a first point of reference. And then because in the Local Government and the Municipal Systems Act, you also get those powers. The Disaster Management Act of 2002, and then there's a generic management legislation in terms of the National Environment Management Act, NEMA, the National Environment Management Integrated Coastal Management, NEMA, ICMA, and the likes. I'm mentioning all of these because with each of the disaster that we find, even if it's prompted by floods, depending on where you are and the nature, you will find that we might need to resort to one piece of legislation first above others, just because of the nature of the disaster. So in other words, because there is a family of legislation, then the answer to demand our rights might be found in one legislation and not the other. So we need to keep that in mind. And then in terms of some terms that we've spoken about, to say this needs to be able to look at the preparedness of the municipality. So preparedness refers to the knowledge and capacity development to effectively respond to and recover from the impacts of disaster or potential disasters. So if you are able to have that knowledge, and that knowledge will help you to do like this, then you could say you are prepared. Response refers to necessities. It necessitates the provision of emergency service and public assistance during or immediately after disaster in order to save lives, reduce health impacts, ensure public safety, and meet the basic subsistence needs of people affected by the disasters. That is the response element. Social relief of distress, taking people to place of safety, public halls and all that, temporary shelters. So all of that falls under the response element, and that would need to scrutinize to see if we are up to scratch in terms of each one of our municipalities. And then lastly, recovery and rehabilitation entail decisions and actions taken after a disaster, and they are aimed at restoring the living condition of the stricken community while encouraging and facilitating adjustments to reduce disaster risk. So that recovery is important because also people need to be involved. It doesn't help to take people back to an area where they will again be subjected to similar risks. Hence, we need to make sure that the recovery part is the one that also speaks to this. And so quickly, in terms of the Constitution, we know that the section on environmental rights is quite important because in the Bill of Rights, it says everyone has a right, including an environmental right, that places a duty on all three spheres of government to take responsible measures to secure for everyone environment that is not harmful to health or well-being. So that is very important. Because climate change and related disasters such as floods, they have a potential to affect people's health and well-being. That section of the Constitution becomes very important. So the health can be affected if there are infectious diseases, water is contaminated, and so on. So also the section of the Constitution, section 7 says, all spheres of government must respect, protect, and promote and fulfill the rights in the Bill of Rights. So that becomes a leg on which we stand when we enforce our rights. So to know about all of this, I mean, for example, to also say that the Constitution becomes our first point of call. It gives us much more ammunition to be able to demand from the municipalities to implement this. And then quickly, the Local Government and the Municipal Systems Act is the one that establishes these rights and obligations for the municipalities, as I have said, in terms of the drainage, in terms of the lived environment, and in terms of the livelihoods of the people, to be able to manage that. The Municipal Systems Act will speak to that. But again, the Disaster Management Act that I've also spoken about, it relies on the local disaster management plan to say that the municipality can approach can declare a disaster in an area if we have the floods, and in so doing, it means it must amass all of its resources to be able to respond to the situation as an emergency, and it can call on the other spheres of government to assist in cases of that, but they must have that management plan to be able to do that. Because when a disaster such as floods occur, it threatens to occur in an area of a municipality, and that municipality concerned, it must determine whether the event should be regarded as a disaster or not. And that is when our inputs make sense. And then in addition to the plan, you will also know that the municipal disaster management framework is a strategic policy for disaster management in a municipality, because it defines the appropriate vision for and approach to disaster management and disaster risk in all of our areas. So it's something that we need to finalize on. So I just want to quickly now turn to what has happened. I mean, there are other pieces of legislation, they all complement this, but I just want to speak quickly about these two case studies. One in Overstrand municipality, there was this citizen who had built their property along the river bank. And so they're in Claremont. And then the Claremont River it flooded, and then the house of this person, it was flooded. So then they claimed that the municipality was supposed to take action because from now and then, the municipality was responsible for managing the water, and at some point they would ensure that when the water reaches 2.1 meters, they have a way of diverting it. But in 2010, they had just decided that they will divert water only if it is 2.6 meters high. So it took the matter to court to say my property was damaged. I had reasonable expectation for the municipality to take action. And because the municipality has failed to take action, when the river flooded, my property was damaged. But the court said, no, you couldn't show any link between the damage to your property and the flooding, because it looks like the flooding didn't occur directly as a result of the municipality not taking action. And they said, no, the municipality doesn't have a responsibility to prevent floods that are naturally occurring, because this is just a river. Occasionally it will flood, and as an individual responsible in that property, you must take your own measures. You cannot rely on the municipality. And of course, the case was narrowly argued, but the end of it was that the court said, no, the municipality does not have a responsibility to take action in terms of naturally occurring floods where water just overflows from a river. And then in another case now in Ekurhuleni, in the metropolitan area, there was this group of firms, light industries along the river, the Estelexprate River. And then even there were flash floods, and then the property was damaged. And so they took the municipality to court to say even the insurance companies don't want to insure us anymore, because these flash floods are destroying our property so frequently. And we are saying the municipality is supposed to take action. And there, what was argued was that the drainage system was clogged. The culverts and all of that, because there were bridges and all that, because it's a built environment, they were not adequately maintained. And as a result of poor maintenance, the erosion, then the water would spill into areas that it's not supposed to. And they were saying it is the responsibility of the municipality. And indeed, the court said, because this is a built environment, it is the responsibility of the municipality to maintain the infrastructure. Therefore, the municipality is responsible for the damages, for paying the damages that have been incurred by these by these properties owners. And so you could now say that it looks like now, if you are in a rural area, I'm just like now talking in overall about these two cases, it looks like if you are in a rural area, some courts or some municipalities may take a view that they don't have a responsibility to prevent floods, either by giving you warning in terms of the warning systems, or by taking any action that they should to prevent and mitigate, because they would say this is natural, it's just a river, and what, it has nothing to do with us. And maybe in a urban area where there's stormwater, there's drainage, there are bridges, there are roads, then you might find that the municipality may be taking a bit more of a responsibility, because infrastructure plays a role in terms of the nature of the floods. But again, the question would now be, why should someone in a rural area be treated differently to someone in an urban area? And we now know that in terms of these pieces of legislation I've mentioned, including that municipal disaster management plan, it must have all those elements: the prevention, the mitigation, and the recovery. So we need to ensure that in all of our municipalities, those elements are met, so that there is no discrimination between citizens who are living in rural areas compared to those in urban areas, or floods that are occurring as a result of the natural flow of water, as opposed to floods occurring because of flow of water that is influenced by a built environment. So it is basically those things I wanted to share with you in terms of where the rights are situated and in terms of where the legislation specifically mentions how the municipalities must be involved. And I want to end this part by also referring to in terms of the NEMA Act and all that. You'll remember the disaster that just occurred as a result of a dam wall that collapsed, and then it caused the water to spill and it washed. It was just like a flash flood, except that it's toxic and all that. So that piece of legislation also puts the responsibility on the municipality to prevent such occurrences and to take action to rehabilitate the environment or to hold those private companies that are supposed to do that accountable. But I'm just also mentioning that in the case of that dam wall that collapsed, we would rely on a different piece of legislation to be able to hold the municipality accountable for ensuring that it is able to manage floods. So thank you. I would like to stop there in the hope that in the course of the discussion, we'll be able to highlight some more areas that we have an interest in, also pointing into the area where you can be able to use the law, the resources that we provide to ensure that in your municipality, you are up to date in terms of preparedness to deal with floods. Thank you. So we'll open time for inputs and questions. If you have anything to say, you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself and make your input.
Morning.
We can hear you. Good morning. We can hear you.
Yes. Oh, okay. I'm Nomboniso from Port St. John's. I've just thank you for this input. Firstly, it is so informative to us. But I have an question here in Disaster Management Act and Plan. I understand maybe disaster management plan can engage it through IDPs, but how can we, the Disaster Management Act, can we engage on those platforms, or there is or which platform can we engage these things? Because some of them in those IDP outreach program, we don't hear about it. So I just checking as paralegals now, or as advice officers, can we get training in these acts so that we can have a clear understanding of them before we engage, or there are platforms for us to engage? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that the aim is to create that platform and approaches to engagement. I'm saying approaches to engagement because you'll find that in this room, we have different experiences in terms of level of engagement with our municipalities on the issues of disaster management and floods and the IDPs. So, but I think that one of the process that could fall is like to look to see, for example, if we were to say, here is a homework for us all to take with, find out from your municipality, is there an integrated development plan? So that you'll be able to look at that integrated development plan. What does it say about disaster management? What does it say about floods? And then the integrated development plan will be a product of that planning process, the disaster management plan, you know. So it's like, oh, okay, you've drawn this IDP from your local disaster management plan. So we then ask from the municipality, share with us the local disaster management plan. And then it will, in that plan, you'll also find that it provides the scenarios. What are the risks in your area? What is the profile of your area and all of that? Then the IDP is supposed to make the process to work in terms of actioning it. And then in our interactions, then when we have those documents, and then we can then look to see if indeed the plan that the municipality is talking about, is it in compliance with the Disaster Management Act? Is it in compliance with the National Environmental Act in terms of how it prepares everyone to be ready for disaster, and how it responds? It seeks to respond when we have floods, and how it seeks to implement recovery and rehabilitation aspects of implementing that. So yes, the IDP is a document to look at. The local disaster management plan is a thing to look at, including what these documents say about spaces to engage. For example, we adopt the IDPs or an amended ones on the 31st of March. Before we do that, as a municipality, we go out to communities to hear their views, and we open the process of consultation from January and so on. And then we adopt a budget that is linked to this at the end of June. So then you get all these hooks, so that when you look at the document, you are able to see if what is in it might match with what we could be a checklist of things that it is supposed to contain. Yes, there will be a general way of doing it, but there might not be a uniform of doing it in this room, in the sense that some of us are more advanced in our engagement compared to others. And I also want to point this, also because we come from different categories of municipalities, some local, some district, some metros. You will also find that those nuances also play a role in terms of how detailed your plan should be and how extensive it should be. I hope I've answered.
Thank you, Mr. Nyembezi. I'm fine.
Anyone else? Could just be your input, could just be your questions directly, indirectly. If, for example, this has triggered some thought to you, this is the space to just share.
Oh.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I like the fact that you are mentioning that organizations should check with their municipalities, especially check whether the municipality is having any plans around the issue of disaster management. Because I think that can also help in terms of resource mobilization. And also because it might happen that municipality also, in terms of their plan, they have certain planned activity for that specific area. And I think that can help a lot. And also in terms of planning for the LDAs, in terms of their strategy moving forward, I think that can help a lot, so that that can also strengthen the relations between the municipality. When I visited I think Maspagameni, I think Kuha municipality were able to invite Maspagameni to their IDP planning process after discovering that Maspagameni is having financial resources around issues of climate change. And that also helped in terms of cementing, you know, the relations between the LDA and the municipality. Because the minute they know that you are involved in this area, then they will start also recognizing, you know, your role within that locality of the municipality. I thank you.
I would like to find out if you have any early warning systems in your area, and what do they look like? What does the municipality, what does the community, what do stakeholders do to warn communities of impending floods? And does it work? Anybody?
See, we have 2 hands raised.
Good morning, everyone. We are from the rural place of Ngamakwe, where we run Kiniha Rural Advice. My question is, say there is a number of homes, and these homes, they belong to the owners, but they are built near a road. So on this road, flooding happens. I believe you made an example in Jena, and I want to find out, does the municipality, after the flooding happens, does it have a mandate to be liable and held responsible to fix that road? Or is the flooding, the damage that it causes under the, in the hands of the house owners? Say maybe there's 3 or 4 houses built next to this road and it gets damaged by flooding. Who is held liable to rehabilitate that road and develop it?
Yes, it does. The municipality has that responsibility, especially in cases where you find that there is infrastructure, it's a built environment, because sometimes you might find that what increases the risk to flooding is poor maintenance of a built environment. And so because of that responsibility, then the municipality has to take measures. And that is why now, when you look at the IDP and you look at the disaster management plan, you then have to look to see what is it that the municipality is doing to ensure that the place is safe. And also, we're talking about floods and for example, the damage to property. But this may also extend to contamination of drinking water. If the stormwater system is not well maintained, then what comes out of it might contaminate water in the surrounding. So that is why the issue becomes a concern of everyone, and might not necessarily be seen, should not be seen as just affecting people who have houses and property in the area you can point at. You must know that it has got a bigger reach potential to affect a lot of people. And that's why the voices must be united in ensuring that the municipality takes that responsibility. And I also want to say, in terms of that case in Nkosikhulule, it means that if the municipality is failing and it needs to be taken to court, the court will adopt that view to say it is your responsibility, especially to look after the well-being of the people, to look after their well-being. Because if, for example, you are now living under constant fear that your property might be eroded, that your agricultural land might be eroded, just because the municipality is not maintaining or providing enough preventative measures, your well-being is affected negatively. So the municipality must play its role so as not to put you unfairly under fear that you might experience flooding. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. There are many factors to it. Thanks.
Anyone else? Anyone about the early warning systems?
There's another hand.
Yeah, in Port St. John's, we visited the flooded area called Greens Farm on the 29th of this month with Human Rights Commission, where we found out the area that is affected by floods. The people who are building houses there are forcibly build the houses there, and several attempts municipality tried to remove them, but now the law says they must take them in, they must avail the land for those people. The challenge is Port St. George is under a land claim, even the town area, so the town have no land. Now my question is that if the people invading the area, because next of that area there is a small stream with the reeds, and on that thing there is a fight between municipality and environmental affairs. That stream, because the commissioner asked that why that stream is not the municipality is not cleaning it, they said no, the environmental affairs did not want them to take out those reeds because it's a natural reed that is I don't know why they cannot remove them. So you will see now here in Port St. John's, in that area, there is this confusion between municipality, environmental affairs, community that is invading in a wrong area, where they put their houses on top of the drainage, others next to the stream, into the stream, whereby when there is flooding, their houses is flooded. So we are in that challenge now, because out of that visit, I was confused that who must be blamed here, because now municipality is busy looking another land from outside the town farms, whereby they said they want government to buy that land because it's under public works. But the people who are there, they say they don't want to be removed in that area because they are nearer in their jobs, because they are depending in a peace job around town. So in a situation like that area, what can be done?
The people are invading. Yeah, that is a tricky one. You know, in light of the information about the pieces of legislation that are looking at the environment, we can say that a lot of them, they place the responsibility to manage places like the estuaries and the river courses on the shoulders of a local government. It may also be argued that this responsibility obliges the municipality to adopt a risk-averse approach to managing estuaries, river streams and all that, especially in terms of climate-related risk, including climate-related disasters such as flooding, and in terms of protecting the integrity and functioning of the estuary system, and as far as possible, avoiding the environmental degradation to the estuary system. So the National Environmental Management Plan, and it identifies local government as the responsible management authority for developing the management plan for the estuary. The municipal estuary management must take place in cognizance with the principles of cooperative governance. So they must consult the district municipality, the provincial and the national government departments. because it determines that where an estuary falls within a boundary of a single local municipality, that municipality must develop the plan in consultation with other relevant government departments. So what I'm underlining here is that the local municipality has the primary responsibility to develop the plan. And in so doing, it must consult with whoever is a stakeholder and also other government departments to ensure that the plan is intact and there are sufficient resources to manage it. So keep pushing your local municipalities to do the work.
Hey, Mr. Nyembezi, you know, I'm sorry to not raise up my hand. You know, we were with the councillor in that area. Then we end up call the manager who called the engineering. No, it's not engineering. I don't know which manager, but we end up infrastructure, yes, infrastructure manager from the municipality. When you listen from both of them, they take the ball to other person. I understand you now. You are saying they are the primary people who are responsible for this. But when we listen from them, they take the ball to the district, to the provincial government, and when the commissioner follow up, we have follow-up question if that municipalities do these other partners. There's no such. It's only meetings. You see, but it's a long way. We are here. We are here to fight for this. Okay, thank you. It's just a comment now.
Thank you very much for that. And I think that now points to your area of advocacy in terms of what gear must you shift into to be able to get that done. Because now if we were to have your documents here and basically working your advocacy plan and your inputs to the municipality, we will be able to refer to specific sessions of the NEMP Act and say, look, Regulation 5 says this, Section 34 says this, in terms of putting the mandate on the local municipality to be the one that must develop the plan, doing it in consultation with others. It must be the one that oversees the implementation of the plan with the assistance of any other stakeholder departments that must work. So that is an advocacy area for you. And because we've said our rights come from the Constitution, they come from the pieces of legislation, we can then shape your inputs informed by those specific sections of the legislation to press the municipality to do this that they are supposed to do. Anyone else?
Hi, good day all. I do have a question. Sorry, this is Washila Douris from Salda LDA in Gravater. We don't have a flooding problem. The problem that we do have is drought. Recently, about a month ago, we received knowledge that one of the farmers that owns private land on which there is 2 boreholes from which that borehole supply water to the Lamberts Bay area and part of the Gravater area. And that farmer, he actually denied the municipality access to enter the ground because it's private owned ground. What I really want to know, and then the other issue that we do have is when it's load shedding. We also experience a water issue because, like they said to us, because of the load shedding, the reservoir can't pump. So to a degree, I do understand that. But water is one of our basic human rights to have access to water. And how do we actually hold the municipality accountable for that service delivery? Because it's really getting your dignity is being taken away there. Because as warmer as it gets, it's getting drier here by us. So if you can please maybe inform me how, as an LDA, what we can do. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I could hear your voice. I could recognize your voice. Look, the first overall answer is that we will be having another seminar focusing directly on droughts. And we will still be talking along the same lines. The Constitution provides the rights. The same pieces of legislation would provide what needs to be done in case of drought under different schedule. And then we look at it in detail, just because droughts are different from droughts in terms of what needs to be done, the response, the time sensitivity, and all that. So we will have we'll have another session to do with that, in the same way as we will have another seminar to look at food security as affected by droughts and floods. So climate change and natural disasters, so that we can look in detail. So today's session is just more about floods. But again, in coming to answer you, yes, the municipality is still primarily responsible to take action to deal with the situation, because the principles that guide this is that, and they are applicable to all spheres of government, including local government, is that there must be precautionary and preventative measures taken, and they require that the municipality must take risk-averse and cautious approach to apply these measures. And it must take into account the limits of the current knowledge that people have about the situation, the risk they are facing, so that the decisions they take and the actions must be informed by having first empowered people to have sufficient information as to what needs to be done. But the duty of care is there. But I won't be able to say much now more about the droughts, just because we need to switch onto another section.
Okay, thank you very much.
Nyembezi, I see there's a comment from Fletcher in the chat. Not sure if you put something you'd like to respond to.
Here in Manfleta, our local municipality does not comply with the Disaster Management Act, because if there's a crisis, they come for reports and they take pictures of infrastructure that got damaged, but they don't do anything about the situation. They just relax as if there's nothing that happened to our local community, and after certain years, they just come and put something like bungalows and make a lot of excuses about the delays. Yes, you see, that is what now brings us to the need for us to be there as to advocate for these rights, to make sure that the plans are in place, the plans are proper, and the plans are implemented. So in other words, if you are in Manfleta and now you want to look at the IDP and you want to look at the disaster management plan, you will look in terms of those three elements we've spoken about. The preparedness. Is there enough knowledge and capacity that is developed for people to effectively respond and recover from the impacts of floods, disasters? So what is in the plan? And something that is in the plan also can be looked at in terms of what is objectively verifiable by also looking as how much in the budget is allocated for preparedness. You also look at the response, because the response necessitates that there must be emergency services, public assistance, which must be immediately after a disaster has occurred so as to save lives, reduce the impact of health, and ensure public safety. You interrogate those documents and the budget to see to it if they are up to standard in terms of the response, as well as the recovery and rehabilitation. Now, if the municipality has a plan, a glossy plan that shows all of these things to say, we are ready to do ABC, and they would say in the budget, they've allocated so much under these items. Now, the point of advocacy and accountability is to look to see, have you spent the funds that you said you have allocated in the financial year for this purpose? And have you spent all of them? And did we get good value for money? Because sometimes there's 2 million rand put there or what. We had the scandal in KwaZulu-Natal where in terms of providing water trucks, but now the water trucks were going to the premier's house and not so much spending much time in the community. So they were feeding the premier's private household. Those kind of things. So that is what you get to look at. Is the plan there? Does it meet these 3 criteria? Is the money allocated for it? Is it enough? And also now that we are saying, we're not just looking at disasters as a small thing that happens once in 7 years. We are looking at climate change and the frequency and intensity of these events. So you will then look to see, is the money allocated enough to be able to deal with all what we can anticipate is going to happen? And if it is not enough, you then influence the municipality to allocate enough money. The other thing that you'll also see is that sometimes the money is there, let's say 1 million rand, but you will find that in terms of what could be seen as competing interests, the municipality may think that let us spend the money in areas where we can get tenders and pocket and not prioritize it in areas that are going to benefit people. So maybe they want to spend it in areas that are going to benefit a few people, the elite, instead of spending it proportionately to be able to develop, to benefit the bigger number of the population where the need is greatest and where the vulnerability is highest. So it is those details that inform your advocacy strategy when you engage with these documents and with the municipalities, and with a strong voice enforcing it, because you will say the constitution says this and the pieces of legislation says this, and you must do it as the municipality. Anyone else? Anything to share? Anything to ask? Do we all feel confident, inspired that we can go back to our municipalities to get the IDPs, to get the disaster management plans, so that we can sit down to interrogate them to see if they comply with these elements that we are discussing here? Is it something that you think we can be able to do? I'm also asking because in terms of all the seminars we're talking about that we're going to be doing, we are mindful of the fact that only in 2021, November, we had the elections for the local government. The councillors that are in office now, they are at the beginning of their 5-year term mandate. And so they are supposed to be new brooms that sweep clean. the IDPs and other plans have also been revised or are in the process of being revised, informed by the fact that the municipal councils are new, fresh from the elections last November. So there is space in our municipalities to be able to interact with the councillors to ensure that the IDPs and the plans, they speak to disaster management, to climate change, to floods in terms of this workshop. And there is that space. So the question is like, are we confident that it is something that we can dive into to get those documents, to work out a plan that will influence the decision makers?
Okay, here in Port St. John's, it's easy to get it, the documents, because they have a new person now within the municipality, a climate change officer, whereas she's new, but we are already contacting each other. So I think we will get this document and look at it, and I think maybe we'll share some of the things that we pick up from them.
Anyone who thinks they would have a difficulty in getting hold of the documents and getting hold of the councillors to have a conversation?
Good morning, everyone. I think here in Mount Fresher, we are going to struggle to get those information because we don't have a valid local municipality. So we have to take the journey to go to Matlie to ask for those documents, but we are going to try by all means to ask for those documents. But if we get it, we are going to share some of the information to you.
Thank you. So for Manflesa, it would take a journey to another town to get hold of the people to interact with, to get hold of the documents. So the question also is for other people, what would it take for you to engage with these documents so as to influence the decision makers?
Another thing, Mr. Nyembezi, if your municipality have a website, you can access this document from their website. Thank you.
Okay. Claire, Tara, any inputs?
Just to note that there was a comment from Mhlango in the chat. And from Manfred, but they were repeating what was just said.
Okay. Of course, we encourage everyone to get hold of these documents so as to continue the conversation we are having here. And we are available to bounce ideas, to talk one-on-one, because ultimately each municipality, IDP, and the putting together, the adoption, the implementation, it speaks to that municipality and the conditions of that municipality. So we encourage you to do that and know that the space is available for us to continue this conversation. But we are also encouraging you with some assumption that even this that you might find in the, like when you go to the website and like to look for the documents, what you might find might not speak to the reality on the ground. So it's important. Some municipalities say we don't have the thing, or our IDP doesn't say anything about climate change, anything about floods, droughts, or food security. Or some may say, yeah, it does speak to that. But when you look, you have now to see, is that the lived reality that you are used to in terms of what is on paper? Because some municipalities, they just hire consultants to put these documents together and put them up, load them onto website, but they didn't consult with people, or the value and the meaning is not there. So don't be surprised if you see that you have to start from scratch, even in a municipality where the document exists and it has got some pages, paragraphs on these issues that we are talking about.
Hi, if I can just say something about that. I'm a ward committee member, and the IDP has been reviewed sometime in September, and there is no indication of disaster management or climate change. And I actually raised my hand and asked, what are they doing about this? Firstly, they don't know really what's climate change. So that is where we must come in and educate them. And then for the disaster management thingy, they really said the municipality doesn't have money at the moment to focus on that. So again, my question is, we must somehow be able to keep them accountable, because we can't wait for a disaster to happen. Say, like for instance, when it was COVID, Gravater didn't have a place where you can send your COVID patients. So actually the whole of Cedarburg didn't have it. So that is the things that we have to actually to we must really find a way to keep them or hold them responsible, because what's going to happen, say for instance, when we have a flood, we don't have paved streets or whatever. It's like this red sand that's laying here, and a flood will be disastrous, really. So, like I asked, how do we keep them accountable for this? Thank you.
Would it be okay if we can say we can reach an in-principle agreement to say this is, as part of your work, this is an area that maybe we can have an output to say we will each draft and work on a contribution that will make to the municipality in the course of 2023, where we can have our inputs on what the disaster management plan should look like, and in light of climate change, where we are likely to experience more and more of these things, as opposed to a once-off occurrence. So if perhaps we can say, okay, we agree in principle that one of the things that brings us together as we do these seminars is that each one will end up with a contribution that we can give to our municipality that speaks to what we want to see in the IDP, that speaks to what we want to see, how things should be implemented. Now I'm saying, assuming that the IDP lists all of these things that we want to see, but the how part is a missing link. So we'll then make an appropriate contribution to fill the gap in the how part, so that we ensure that the municipality discharges its mandate in terms of disaster preparedness, response, rehabilitation, and so on. Is that something that people have an appetite for?
Yeah, most definitely, because they need to focus on that. we won't actually, we mustn't be caught with our pens down when it happens. I mean, we must be ready for that. And it's imminent to happen. Because like you said, that, it's climate change out there, and we do have to educate, and we have to keep them accountable for our communities.
Any other voice?
There've been two other comments in the chat from Nolutando and Yonela and Sizeka.
So Herschel doesn't get invited to stakeholder meetings that discuss the IDP. We always hear about the reports on the air, and since we engage with the municipality on some meetings, we try to get a platform to check on climate change, disaster, and we did not introduce the climate change program, and they showed an interest on it. Oh, yeah. So Herschel has initiated contact with the municipality, and that is going to change things, because in the past you never used to be invited. So you see, that is how you get things going, to ask what is happening, so that you can also ask them to put you on their invitation list, distribution list, and then you can also get to do regular checks in terms of what meetings are taking place on what month. And then if you have a voice, if you have something to contribute, because you've read the IDP, you've read the disaster management plan, then you know that when you go to those meetings, you will have something to contribute, and that gets the ball rolling. Well, I think we've canvassed enough ground, and as we have said, the conversation continues. We have put together a resource pack, and we will continue to populate the resource pack about information and tools that can help us in the journey of looking at the municipal flood management in our areas, and how the IDP, the budget, and other documents are supposed to speak to what the municipality must do, and how we can use the law, the constitution, to push the municipality to do what they are supposed to do, and to continue to hold them accountable. So I hope that you have found this interaction to be useful, and we will look forward to your inputs and feedback, so that even as we do the next ones, as I've said, we'll also look at the droughts and the food security and something else, and we can also use that feedback to improve in the way we do the workshops, and also in the way in which we take the lessons that we've learned and translate them into practical work in our localities, so that we can make the change. Over to you, Tara. Or Claire, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nyembezi, for bringing this workshop to a close. We see these sessions as an opportunity to continue providing information and to have conversations that might inspire or provide guidance, and also to hear about other people's experiences. So I hope that has been your experience of today's session. And I also just say that after the session, I will send the link to the two documents that we have, as well as the link to register for next week's seminar. We can use this Zoom link again, but the registration link is for data. So I would request that you register again, so that we know that you are planning to attend, and we will load data for you. The other thing is just to note that we really do appreciate that if you have requested data that you do in fact join, because our fund is quite strict on that. They check our lists. So if you haven't yet written your name and organization in the chat, please do so before you leave. And yeah, I think this is, as I said, the beginning of our next series. So we will be holding further workshops, and in our WhatsApp group that, if I'm not mistaken, all of you are in, we invite you to share your thoughts. Maybe there's something that comes up for you after the seminar, something that you thought you would have actually liked to raise and you hadn't raised. We can use the WhatsApp group as a not only to receive information, but to share thoughts and how the information has landed for you. And also if there's things that you would like to see, things that you maybe would like to see as a topic in a future seminar. So we really do invite you to participate and be active in the WhatsApp group. And if you would like to send voice notes, those are also welcome. So I think we can end the session here.